Now, Mr. President, I rise in strong opposition to the nomination of Goodwin Liu to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. As he said at the first hearing before the Judiciary Committee, his record is public, and he has written what he has written. He has said what he has said. That record is what we have to go on, the basis on which we have to make a decision about his nomination to the federal bench or his confirmation here on the floor. Professor Liu's record endorses a powerful judiciary that can take control of the law in general and of the Constitution in particular. His activist judicial philosophy is fundamentally at odds with the principles on which our system of government is based. I examine a judicial nominee's entire record to determine if he is qualified by legal experience and, even more importantly, by judicial philosophy. As to Professor Liu's legal experience, I know that the ABA has unanimously rated him well qualified. That is more than a little baffling, since the ABA's own criteria state the nominee should have at least 12 years of actual law and practice and substantial trial experience as a lawyer or trial judge. So it's a little bit more than baffling. As somebody who's watched the ABA all these years, all 35 years I've been in the Senate, Professor Liu has none of that. None of the actual law practice and substantial trial experience as a lawyer. None. Suffice it to say that understanding the mysteries of the ABA's judicial nominee ratings has eluded me for many years. Sometimes they do a great job, a lot of times they don't, and politics enter in. The more important qualification for judicial service is a nominee's judicial philosophy, or his understanding of the power and proper role of judges in our system of government. Professor Liu has been unequivocal about his views on this critical issue, writing and speaking directly about how judges should go about judging. He has written and spoken extensively about how judges should interpret and apply the law, especially the Constitution, to decide cases. The debate about judicial philosophy really comes down to this. We can all read what the Constitution says. The real question is what the Constitution means, where the meaning of its words properly may be found. The debate is about who gets the final say on what the Constitution means, the people or the judges. America's founders clearly took the people's side in this debate. In his farewell address in 1796, President George Washington said that the very basis of our political system is that the people control the Constitution. He said that until the people change the Constitution, it is sacredly obligatory upon all. That certainly includes, in fact, that primarily includes government, because it was the Constitution that exists to both empower and to limit government. The Constitution cannot limit government if it cannot limit judges, and it cannot limit judges if they control what the Constitution means, in accordance with their own predilections and their own values. The Constitution belongs to the people, not to judges. President Obama takes the opposite view. When he was a senator and opposed the nomination of Chief Justice John Roberts, one of the greatest one of the greatest appellate lawyers in the history of the country, he said that judges decide cases based on their deepest values and core concerns, their perspective on how the world works, their empathy, and what is in their heart. That's what then Senator Obama said. As a presidential candidate, he made the same case to the Planned Parenthood Action Fund and said that these were the criteria by which he would pick judges. President Obama has certainly kept that campaign promise in the person of Professor Goodwin Liu. Professor Liu has written that judges are literally on a search for new constitutional meaning. In article after article, in speech after speech, he argues that judges on this quest for new constitutional meaning may find it in such things as the concerns, conditions, and evolving norms of society, social movements and practices, and shifting cultural understandings. No matter how you cut it, these are simply alternative ways of saying that the Constitution means whatever judges say it means. This is a blueprint for a judiciary that controls the Constitution. Professor Liu's approach treats the Constitution as if it were written in some kind of code or disappearing ink, and treats judges as the only ones who have the key to figuring it out. Professor Liu, of course, is hardly the only one to make this argument. It's pretty standard fare for those who want our Constitution to say and to mean something other than what it does. When these folks want government to have power that the real Constitution denies, they urge judges to change the Constitution's meaning to be what they want. And when these folks do not want government to have power that the real Constitution allows, they urge judges to make up so-called rights that are not there at all. Whether seeking liberal or conservative political results, this is real judicial activism. Judges taking control of our law by taking control of its meaning. Judges remaking the Constitution in their own image. In my 35 years of actively participating in the judicial confirmation process, I don't recall someone who more forcefully and directly advocated such an activist judiciary. In a 2008 article published in the Stanford Law Review, for example, Professor Liu argued that the judiciary is, quote, a culturally situated interpreter of social meaning, unquote. That would be a surprise to America's founders, who had a much more pedestrian view of the judiciary, which Alexander Hamilton described as the weakest and least dangerous branch. Thomas Jefferson warned that if judges could control the Constitution's meaning, it would be nothing but a lump of wax the judges could twist and shape into any form they please. There is no room in this modest judicial role for something as grand as interpreting social meaning. Now, I grant that there are individuals or institutions in our society who should play this role. I think that elected representative bodies like the one in which I am proud to serve should play this role, and so does the Constitution. But the last body of people in our society who should play this role of culturally interpreting social meaning are judges in whose hands is placed the interpretation and application of the supreme law of the land. I, for one, did not take an oath to support and defend a judge's empathy or perspective on how the world works, whether that judge is liberal or conservative or something in between. I did not take an oath to support and defend a judge's view of evolving social norms or shifting cultural understandings. I took an oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States, a document that belongs in its words and its meaning to the people of the United States. The Constitution I have sworn to support and defend places limits on government, including limits on the judiciary, and the people alone have authority to change those limits. Professor Liu advocated an activist judiciary before he had been nominated to the judiciary. But when he came before the Judiciary Committee in each of 2 hearings, he painted a very different picture. Before his nomination, for example, he wrote in the Stanford Law Review that judges must determine, quote, whether our collective values on a given issue have converged to a degree that they can be persuasively crystallized and credibly absorbed into legal doctrine, unquote. After his nomination, he told the Judiciary Committee that there is no room for judges to invent or create new theories. Now, it is anybody's guess what all of that collective value convergence and credible crystallization really means. But if that stuff is not a new theory, I don't know what it is. Before his nomination, Professor Liu wrote directly and forcefully about where judges should look for the meaning of the Constitution. He made a career of it, received awards for it, and became one of the stars of the left-wing legal universe. After his nomination, when I raised some of his controversial writings at his first hearing, Professor Liu told me that, quote, whatever I may have written in the books and in the articles would have no bearing on my role as a judge, unquote. And then at the end of that same hearing last year, Professor Liu told one of my committee colleagues that, quote, as you look across my entire record, there are many things, I think, relevant to the kind of judge I would be, unquote. Well, which is it? Before he wants to be a judge, he argues that judges can find new meaning for the Constitution in changing cultural understanding and evolving social norms. After he wants to become a judge, he tells critics to ignore that record, but tells supporters to consider that record. This has been about the most stunning confirmation conversion I've seen in all my time in the Senate. I'm really concerned about this nomination. I don't personally dislike this man. He's I'm sure, a very articulate and provocative law professor, and law professors tend to be that way. I remember Judge Bork, who was savaged here by the other side in the United States Senate, one of the greatest political and economic thinkers, but most importantly, judicial thinkers that I've ever known. And he was savaged for remarks that were not any less or not any more than Goodwin Liu. In closing, the fight over judicial nominees is really a fight over judicial power. Judges must either take the law as they find it, as the people and their elected representatives make it, or judges may make the law into whatever they want it to be. Those are the two choices. Our liberty requires that people to whom the Constitution belongs alone have authority to change it. Our liberty requires judges who will be controlled by that Constitution. President Obama and Professor Liu instead advocate a judiciary able to control the Constitution, to change the Constitution, to literally create from scratch a new Constitution, or at least new provisions of the Constitution. That will destroy our liberty. When I look at Professor Liu's record, I see that he consistently and strongly advocates an approach that allows judges to find the meaning of the Constitution virtually anywhere they want to look. That is the opposite of the defined, limited role that judges properly have in our system of government. I cannot support someone for appointment to the federal bench, especially to what is already the most activist circuit in the country, who believes that judges should have that much power. Now, having said that, Mr. President, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is the most activist court in the whole country. It is a court that ignores the law consistently, or at least some of the judges on that court. Judge Reinhardt, who's a brilliant man by any measure, apparently doesn't even care what the words of the Constitution say. He's going to interpret things the way he believes, which is pretty contrary to what the Constitution actually says, and pretty contrary to the laws that we who are elected to make the laws have put in writing. And he's just one. There's a whole raft of them there. Judge Reinhardt gets reversed almost every time he writes an opinion by the Supreme Court of the United States. The problem is, and people can say, well, then isn't that taken care of by the Supreme Court? Yeah, it is in those individual decisions, but in these circuit courts of appeals, there are thousands of court cases and legal opinions written that will never be considered by the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court only considers between 80 and 100 cases a year. But thousands of cases are decided by these circuit courts of appeals, so they're important. And who we put on them is important too. And we don't need any more judicial activists, either from the right or left, interpreting the Constitution in accordance with their own predilections rather than what the Constitution actually says. And in Goodwin Liu, he has a long history of really outrageous comments, at least to us conservatives, and I think really to good-thinking liberals who want the courts to be what they should be, interpreters of the laws, not makers of the law. They're not elected for anything, and they're appointed for life on the basis that they will do what's right, and that they will uphold the law, regardless of whether they agree with it or not. They certainly can write in their opinions why they disagree with the law, but they've got to uphold the law unless the law is absolutely unconstitutional. And I've got to say that the folks on our side who have listened to Goodwin Liu, we know that what he stands for and what he has taught in schools, what he has written in books and law review articles, is really contrary to what judges should do. And I don't care that the American Bar Association has given him such a sterling qualification, something they would not do for any Republican appointee. I have to tell you, I've never seen it before. Somebody has zero experience in court and really zero experience in the law other than as a professor. And that's an honorable, top position. And then to do what they did, I mean, it's astounding to me. And I think a discredit to the American Bar Association, which should be down the line honest. And in this particular case, has been anything but. This is an important issue. I wish I didn't have to vote against Goodwin Liu, because I like him personally. I like provocative law professors, even when they disagree with me. In fact, sometimes especially because they disagree with me. But they darn well better be intelligent disagreements. I like that. But I worry about some of these far-left law professors who are teaching our kids how to become lawyers and teaching them the wrong things. It's okay if they teach them the wrong things, but also teach the right things and contrast the two. I don't have any problem with that. I do have problems with law professors who basically ignore the actual words in the law, and especially when they ignore the words in the Constitution or distort those words in the Constitution, which I found Goodwin Liu has done from time to time, and which I believe disqualify him for this very, very high honor of being on a court which, like other circuit courts of appeals, happen to be very, very important. And the next court immediately under the Supreme Court of the United States of America. With that, I suggest the absence of a quorum and ask that the time be divided equally.